Hi there, I'm Juan Lam, and what I want to do today with this video is make a devlog for writing, because I felt like that's not something I see very often on YouTube, and I look for it, I really do, because I'm also into game development, and there's tons of devlogs for game development, but for writing, zip, zero, none. And the writing process is this thing where it's a little ambiguous, and it's very different for everybody, so I kind of want to open up my writing process in action as it's happening. I know people have made videos about their writing process and all that stuff, but I'm gonna be writing a short story over the course of the next 3 days because Uncanny Magazine, who are they're a speculative fiction magazine, and they publish fiction, poetry, editorials, and critiques, novellas, excellent speculative fiction, sci-fi, fantasy, best of the best. And they're opening up their submissions August 4th. Today is August 2nd. It's 7:41 p.m. Miami time. And I want to write this story and I want to submit it. I don't have a story yet though. I have a title, and I have a concept, but I don't have a story. So I felt like it was a good opportunity to maybe go and just share with the world my writing process and kind of how I figure things out. And maybe this will help me as well. Anyways, here's what I've got so far. The title is The Sun Chaser, and the concept of the story is this guy who kind of goes equator to equator, and he tries to chase the summer, or escape winter, depending on how you look at it. And he cannot get caught in winter by any means. That's all I've got. It's probably going to be a magical realism sort of thing, maybe. It is speculative fiction, so I'd like to have some speculation. Yeah, I don't know. This is my first short story in over 3 months. The last short story that I wrote got published, which is excellent. It got published at my university, but I haven't written one since, and this is my first one. So let the writing begin. I gotta start now. I have two more days besides today to write, edit, and submit this. So it's 9:50 p.m. and I have not written down one single idea. However, I have spent a lovely couple minutes talking to my family, so that's worth something, right? Something I've really thought about recently in the last couple minutes is how hard it is to start writing, and that's partially because there's this like fear that whatever you're gonna write is not going to be good enough. At least that's the case for me. Right off the bat, before I even set down a word, I think about how not good what I'm going to write is, and that's definitely something that stops you from being able to write. Plus, there's that difficulty of when you're starting, you got to build up momentum, right? This is true for rocks going down a hill. This is true for writing. You need some momentum, and I spend quite a bit of time trying to set the right tone, finding music. I'm trying to write a novel. I'm in the outlining phase. I'm trying to figure out the story, and the first thing that I did was try to figure out what is the sound of the novel. What is the theme music, and once I found it, the ideas really started to flow. And I tried to do the same thing with the story. I put on some lo-fi beats, some summer vibes, and maybe gave myself some tea. The other hard thing about starting a story is that the blank page effect. But for me, it comes down to something more specific, which is decision fatigue. Because when you're writing a story, you kind of think of it like a choose your own adventure book, right? You have to go one way or the other, and as you write the story, those paths are more and more defined. But when you first start off, there's an infinite amount of possibilities because it's a blank page. It doesn't exist. So I find myself answering questions like, why does the man not want to be in the winter season? What is he afraid of? What is his rhyme and reason for chasing summer? And that's tricky. Not because it's hard, but just because it's I could do anything, and that's almost a little bit overwhelming. Like I could make it so I don't know. Well, he's allergic to the sun. He's allergic to winter. Maybe he's allergic to snow. Or he has a curse on him. or a magical centaur dude told him to. I could go any of those routes and it would be perfectly valid, is, you know, especially if I build the rest of the story and really take serious that reason. As you write, it becomes more and more inevitable that it happened. But when you're first starting and you have to make the decision between, oh, am I going to do this or am I going to do that? And that's where I'm at right now. I'm gonna write for maybe an hour more tonight, and then I'm gonna go to sleep. And tomorrow I'm gonna really have to kick it into gear and write this story. So we'll see how that goes. It's 10:58 p.m. It's been about an hour since I sat down and started to think about what I was gonna write, and something happened. I filled out just about most of this notepad, and I think that I've got something. It's not a story because I don't have a plot. I don't. Not that a plot makes a story, but there's no sequence of events, and I feel like, you know, that's generally important in a story. But I do have some themes, and I have ideas, and I have not characters, but the shadows of a character, like the vague outlines of what a character could be like in this story. And as some plot points do exist, like there's going to be maybe a curse, I think. And there's some scenes that I visualized in my head, and I think I have a theme. And I've realized that I do think in themes. I think, well, my writing process is a bit like making a sculpture or whittling. And you take this big block of possibility and you draw, or I draw, I don't know what you do, you could visualize, you could, you know, whatever, anyways, you draw some arbitrary lines on it, some doodles, and then from there you kind of refine the shape of that until you have something that has a shape and it's not just a blob. So that's kind of how my process goes. I do work in broad strokes and then narrow down into a more defined story, and until I have a story. And I guess that's one way you could tackle that, like, limitless possibilities. You just draw an arbitrary line and go from there. And for me, that arbitrary line was, I visualized like just the general scene of like an old man in a bookstore in Italy, and I guess some dialogue is like, oh, it's an old curse. Maybe the main character explaining why they are constantly running from winter. It's an old curse, and there you go. That's a line. That's something, right? And then once you get to a point where you could ask questions, like, well, where did that curse come from, and what does that curse mean? What does it do? How does the main character deal with the curse? That's when you start getting a story, and that's where you transition from this point of where you have an idea to where you have a story, and it all starts with where you can get a question. For this one, you know, it's somebody. I said a man who goes from, you know, who chases summer. It could be a woman. I don't have a character yet, so it could be anything. It could be a raccoon for all I care. But I thought about summer, and I thought about sailing, and then I thought of this moment in the open ocean at sunset. What kind of story would have that moment? And I've spent most of my time today there. And I guess I think about theme a lot. So maybe while I was thinking of those visuals, themes came up, and everything is really reactive. It all ties together very much. So as I was thinking about theme, I also thought about some plot points, right? Winter thematically is representative of death, but that could be turned into a literal point if I wanted it to be, and maybe I will. Maybe it's a character who's not just escaping winter in a literal sense in terms of the story, but also escaping death in the more thematic sense. I don't know, or maybe I'm being pretentious. Who's to say? But yeah, so once you ask questions, you're getting somewhere, because with questions, that's kind of how you, or at least that's how I build setting. That's how I build character, and that's how I build a plot, right? That's the basis. If you start asking questions, you get everywhere else Question. You gotta be like a little kid. Questions are what's gonna get you where you need to go. Anyways, it's 11:06 p.m. I have a meeting at 8 a.m. tomorrow. I gotta go to sleep because I do have a job. Kind of. I do web development when I'm not writing, or maybe I write when I'm not doing web development. I hope it's the former, not the latter. But yeah. So, good night. So it is midnight, and guess who hasn't written anything? It's me. I haven't written a word. Writing's hard, but the only thing that's harder than writing is sitting down to write. And today was one of those days where I just couldn't sit down and write. In my defense, I had a lot of meetings and a fairly stressful day, and I did get a lot done. It just wasn't words, and that's okay. However, it does mean that tomorrow I have to write. Well, I have to finish outlining. I don't even have a story. Write and then edit whatever I have and submit that. I think I might just extend my own personal deadline a little bit. We'll see. Anyways, for now I'm just gonna go to sleep and hope that tomorrow there's some more words on the page than there was today. Or yesterday, technically. So, good night, and see you tomorrow. Hello. So, it is August 11th, 11:54 a.m. Quite a few days have passed since my last update I sat down. So, as you could probably guess, I have not turned it in. I haven't turned in the story. I haven't even finished it. As a matter of fact, I haven't even written it. But I've done other things. Particularly, I have an outline now. And that is excellent news, because that means that today, hopefully in the evening, I could sit down and actually start the writing process and drafting what the story is going to be like. So, where to update you guys? So, where we last left off, I had the vague outline of some characters and an idea of the themes. And I sat down that night, and I had some tea, and I really started thinking about the story. And I've not been working on it consistently or very hard. What I've been doing is that I've been spending most of my day doing other things, and then when nighttime rolls around for an hour, 30 minutes, I sit down and I think about the story. And so I'm at this point now where I've defined a lot of things, and I've done that by a process of asking questions. So now I know more about the curse. I know how that works a little bit better, and I know about who the main character is and what's going to happen in the story. And really what this has been all about, the process. I don't know if you saw my cat in the background. She's back here doing something. What the process has been just asking questions and thinking and sitting down. And I've discovered now that I'm being more intentional about writing, really intentional, and I'm really trying to do it, maybe not as consistently as I would like to, but we're getting there. What I've discovered is that writing is a little bit like meditating, if you've ever done that, at least for me. The point of meditating is just you sit down, you focus on your breath or some environmental constant, maybe sounds in your environment, and you kind of try to put all of your focus into that area of focus that you've chosen. And whenever your attention strays, you sort of pay attention to that, and you gently remind yourself to go back to what you're focusing on, what you want to focus on. And that's what writing is like for me a little bit. I've noticed that all I have to do to create a story is sit down and let my mind do the thing. And whenever my mind gets distracted from the thing, to gently shepherd it back into shape, right into where I want it, to graze on the grasses of new thoughts and whatnot. And through that process, I've kind of figured out what the story is going to be, and I figured out who the main character is. It's not going to be a man going from equator to equator, escaping a curse. It's going to be a girl. Her name is Polina. She's Russian, and she's burying her mom, or spreading her ashes out somewhere in her home. And it is not Polina who's cursed, but it was her mother. And through this process of thinking about what would make a good story, and pulling out from little bits and pieces of what I remember from maybe a Russian fairy tales class, or from some other thing, and then also going back to those original ideas that I had when I first started brainstorming this story, and I went into my cinematic mode of like thinking of an old man in a bookshop in Italy, and a moment in the open sea at sunset. And I think about those moments and I say, okay, where do these fit in the story, and how do these moments fit in the story? And through that process of just thinking, sitting down and putting myself in the shoes of the character and asking questions, I've gotten where I wanted to be, and I have a story and I have an outline. So a couple things. Once you're at a point where you have a vague notion of what's going to happen, where you could be like, okay, well then this happens, and I know this happens, and I know that this also happens, but you have no clue how to bridge that. That's where I was last night when I was thinking about this, and I was really sitting down to write, not write, but outline write. You got to go back into what you already have. Because if you're at that point in the story, in the development of the story, I'd say you're 60% there. The other 40% is writing, but you basically have a story. What you got to do is see what you already have, because chances are you already have the groundworks for something magical, for a story. So go back, Chekhov's gun style, and look at what you have and expand on it. So and also try to get a feeling for what is missing. What are you missing? In my case, I was missing magic, because this is an Uncanny Magazine submission. I'm making this for Uncanny Magazine. They are a sci-fi and fantasy magazine. They do speculative fiction, so I need magic. And aside from the curse, I felt like there wasn't too much magic. So how could I add some more magic into this? And the other thing is that I was missing a heart. I had the idea of a heart. I knew this was going to be a mother-daughter story. But because of the way that I want to set it up, where at the beginning she is spreading her mother's ashes out in their home, their old home of the river Volga in Russia, I need a memory. And once I figured those two things out, I'm like, okay, I have a middle scene. The climax is going to be a magic moment. And a memory is going to be what fills in the spaces between the first and the second act, and the second and the third act. And the third and the ending. I want the last scene to be a memory. So now having that, I guess what I have to do is figure out this delicate balance, right? This trick of how do you make it compelling. Now you have to figure out some beats and where the power of the story is. And I think that in any story, there's a question, there's an answer to that question, and then there's a point. There's a heart. Something beyond what the question is asking. It's about what the question's implying. Right? What is the point of the story? And that's not a new revelation to anybody who's watching this, I'm sure, but I suppose that the trick is getting people hooked on finding out what the answer is to the question. But once they get the answer, to lay enough emotional seeds that they want to stick around to get to the point of the story. I think that's what I'm trying to figure out. And this is a mother-daughter story. So the question is Paulina cursed as well as her mother? Does she inherit her mother's curse? And we're going to get an answer to that in the climax, probably, right? But there's something that comes after that. And how do I get people invested enough in Paulina's relationship with her mother that they want to stick around after they find out what the answer is? And that's where I'm at. And I'm comfortable enough because I know what the beats are, and I know there's going to be the first scene, then a memory, then the climax, right, the second scene, then another memory. Not another memory. There's going to be a second scene, and then the third scene, and then finally another memory. So a total of 5, I guess, beats in this story. And all I have to do now is write it, and I think everything else will come in the editing, perfecting it, making sure that the themes are tied well with the prose and all that fancy stuff. Right now, all I have to do is write it. And typically this is where I've struggled most in the writing process. Although I do take a long time in the outlining process, as evidenced by the fact that I was planning to have this story written by August 4th, and now it is August 11th, and I've just now finished outlining it last night. But outlining is not the hardest part for me. It's perhaps the longest and most tedious part, but it's not the hardest. The hardest is writing, because I'm a perfectionist. So I suppose now the goal is for me to give myself space so that when I write, I don't be a perfectionist. That I allow myself to do something shitty and horrible, and it does not do justice to what I'm trying to make. But like I said earlier, the writing process for me is about making this vague clay thing, right? Massing it up and then giving it form. And that happens in the outlining, the abstract phase of, telling the story. What is the story going to be? And it happens once more when it comes down to actually writing the prose, the nuts and bolts of writing. So that's kind of where I'm at. And we'll see. Hopefully later tonight I can make another update video and get back to you on how this is going. Cheers. Hello, it is August 22nd, and that means it's been 11 days since my last update on where my progress is with this story. And the reason I haven't updated until now is because I haven't had time. However, the story is finished. The first draft, at least. The first draft is done. And I wrote it over the course of a couple of days. Let me take a look here. So I wrote it over the course of 6 days, in which I spent about 195 minutes working on it. So about maybe like 3 hours and some change. Total just working on the prose. And what that looked like was some days I wrote 57 words, other days I wrote 800, and slowly but surely we got there. And I guess the reason why I took so long was because I was dreading making this. The first draft portion of writing is always the part that I struggle in the most. Idea formation takes forever, as you've clearly noticed, and the first draft does too, especially with this story, because I felt like I was out of my depth the entire time. And as a matter of fact, the last couple of days have felt like pulling teeth out. It's been, the writing was not smooth. It did not come out in one miraculous go. What I did discover from taking notes on my writing process was that I'm actually pretty good at writing clean prose. So in my first draft, when I write, it comes out fairly clean, not perfect, but clean enough. Some things that I struggle on is that I get too attached to like, Paulina moved over here, or like little character movement things. And I think that's a habit that comes from being a journeyman in writing. I don't feel like actual writers concern themselves so much where characters are positioned in the room, except to establish it in the first place. But I've written the first draft, and it's 2,000 words, and that's worth celebrating. However, I do have some issues with the first draft. And the reason why I felt like pulling teeth out, and part of the reason why I haven't updated in so long, was because I'm really not fond of the story. Or not that I'm not fond of it. I like the premise. It's just that I feel like something's missing. I feel like I am missing something to give the story polish. And that is where a lot of very intelligent people will say, hey, that's what the second draft is for, and the third draft, and however many drafts you want to go with from this point on. And I would agree. But it's just that this is the part where I struggle with the most. And that's okay. That's just the writing process. So now that I've got that done, I actually sent this to a friend, a couple friends, and I got some feedback, and mostly it's questions that are totally valid. And this is something that I suggest doing simply because to you something might be obvious, but not to other people. And so when you're sharing what you're writing, I would suggest you ask for feedback in different capacities. So the first time that I send out any piece of literature for, straight off the first draft, which you generally shouldn't do, you should wait until your second draft, but because of the way that I do it the first, I send it to people and I say, do you have any questions? Like the most simple questions. Don't worry about grammar. Don't worry about plot structure. Don't worry about criticizing the characters. Just, do you have any questions? And when you have those list of questions, you're good to go, and that's what you're going to be looking at for the second draft. And forward. So now that I have that, I've only got a couple days until the deadline. This story is taking me way longer than I thought it would. I'm going to focus on fixing it up as much as I can and sending it in. I don't think it's going to get published. That's my spoiler alert. but it's worth trying, so might as well. With that said, I guess I'm going to start editing now. I'm done. I'm done with the story, and I've actually edited and submitted it, and it's over. A couple last notes to give you concerning editing. I discovered that most of my issues had to do with information that I wasn't communicating, that I assumed, but that the reader didn't know, which is why it's useful to get feedback if you can. And I suppose the biggest issue was that I had to add some meat to some of the more emotional scenes, some of the memories between Paulina and her mother, because that is the heart of the story. So of course that should be, that should be the focus, making sure that the prose was good, that the flow of the story was solid, and editing's done. A funny thing to note is that way back I said I didn't really like the story, and when I sat down to read it again for the editing process, I found out that I did like it, and that what I wrote was not so bad. So do leave it for a couple days and give yourself the chance, and you might find that what you wrote was not so bad. And I couldn't really tell what was written when I was like in the zone and what was written when I wasn't. I've hit the submit button now though, and the journey is finished. Thank you so much for watching the video this far, if you're still around. I'm gonna keep doing these. Please suggest to me a different format in the comments if you'd like. I don't know if this 40 to 30 minute or 20 minute extravaganza of footage is sustainable for me or for you, so let me know if there's a better way that I could do this, especially because writing is not a super visual medium. I can't really put video of me writing. I mean, I can, I suppose, B-roll, but I don't know that it would be so engaging. And I actually kind of like this format of me talking to the camera or to you, as if we were having a conversation one-to-one. Anyways, if you like this video, I will be making more of these types of things, or breaking down some of my other stories, showing you the outlining process. And you can check out my website to find my other published works. And hopefully this one gets published. If it doesn't, that's okay, and I'll make a video talking about rejection and why it's important. I've been rejected many times, and if it gets accepted, that'd be really neat. So I'll let you know. Thank you for everything, and enjoy yourselves. Happy writing.